24 centers within Kazakhstan, and our centers are represented all around Kazakhstan, and it's quite extended network. And of course, we're committed to the implementation of SDGs and the 2030 agenda, both in terms of research, but also in terms of making a policy impact. And since we're part of public policy school, this is our goal as well, is to make a policy impact with research that we conduct as well. And so the SDSN was founded in Kazakhstan. The Kazakhstan chapter was founded only in 2022 by my colleague Stefanos Xenarius, who remains to be an advisor to SDSN Kazakhstan. And we have missions to promote practical solutions to the development of long-term solutions in Kazakhstan, support high-quality education in the area of SDGs, and also we want to suggest applied research and policy initiatives. And we have, if you will check our website, we are just developing a new website where we outline our research priorities, and they include energy, but also land and water, and the third research priority is related to partnership in education. So these are the three broad areas that our center wants to focus as a research center. And here are just some of the examples of the project we are doing this year. So it's clean energy and policy and innovations project that was initiated by my colleague Stefanos Xenarius. We are working on this project together with International Energy Agency. The next one is on one that I will be talking today, SDG Barometer, and then another is with my colleague from the Graduate School of Education. It's about the sustainability education in higher educational institutions in Kazakhstan. And we also strive to become an interdisciplinary center. So we started applying for grants with colleagues from engineering department, for example. There's one grant application that we're part of that is related to renewable energy and construction of renewable energy facilities in Kazakhstan. And also we are partnering with anthropology department as well in our university for another grant application. So we want also to, going forward, we want to be a very interdisciplinary center, not only public policy oriented, but also we want to have experts in the center that will be covering other areas as well. Now on the project of the SDG Barometer, this is truly an interdisciplinary project. What we want to do with this project is to apply the Sustainable Development Goals framework in order to identify most important agenda issues at the country. So it's a national, sub-national, and the individual levels. And we are not only working with the 17 SDGs, but also we worked with the UN guidance document that provided the indicators for each of the 17 SDGs. So in total, the United Nations produced, if I'm not mistaken, it's over 200 indicators that would make up each of the goals. So what we tried to do is we wanted to turn these indicators into the questions so that the citizens could rank the SDGs. And we have in the survey, we are not asking them to rank only 17 SDGs, but also we have sections in the survey specifically addressing, for example, not only 17 SDGs, but also, for example, regional problems. There is a section addressing governance problems. There is a section addressing external threats as well as internal threats. And we also are able to see the data for particular regions as well. And of course, it's mainly coming from the public policy field, where we want to look at the agenda. What's the agenda of not only on the government agenda, but also what the citizens think that what kind of sorts of issues should be prioritized in that particular region, but also in the country. And that was the idea of the project, and we surveyed all 17 regions in Kazakhstan and 3 major cities. I think there is next will be some data about the respondents. But these are the objectives. It's about monitoring awareness, implementation, and analyzing policy agendas, and it's about identifying priority areas of the SDG implementation and provide overview of the SDG implementations. And what we want to generate as well is to generate insights for policy. The ultimate goal is to foster a more inclusive and informed approach to sustainable development. Since it's interdisciplinary study, these are the 2 broad schools of thought that influenced the design of this research. It's first from the development studies perspective. Now in the development studies, the predominant approach is the method that some people call diagnostic method or group diagnostics, and it's based on the conclusion that the previous development strategies, and there was, for example, a lot of criticism on the Washington Consensus agenda, or even the good governance agenda, that the conclusion was that these strategies had mixed results, especially in developing countries, because of their prescriptive nature, meaning that there was one size fits all approach that, for example, in the Washington Consensus, the main pillars were liberalization and the privatization and the deregulation, and this did not work. So the package of the problems, or the so-called proverbial laundry list of the reforms, didn't deliver results, and of course they all had to be also be implemented all at the same time. And these reforms had attracted a lot of criticisms because of the mixed results. And in the end, of course, especially that was clear towards the global financial crisis of 2008 and 2000 and later on as well. In the end, there was a lot of criticism of the existing development strategies, and the approach, the new approaches suggested, emphasized the granular approach. They emphasized the approach that takes into account the local peculiarities of developing countries, and the approach that would come with an open mind, with a very open mind, first of all, in terms of what's going to work and what's not going to work, and based on that, provide a diagnostic of the problems, and then based on these diagnostics, address specific binding constraints. And the idea is that developing countries, of course, there are so many binding constraints, but if you get right a few of them that would have a major impact on the development, then they will have these few binding constraints. The resolution of these problems would have a very serious or profound impact on the solution of other development problems. And from the public policy perspective, it's of course it's about the policy process, that the understanding that the policies come not in a straightforward way, but as a result of as a stage process. That and one of the initial stages is agenda setting, and of course the important stage or the important process in the agenda setting is, of course, the question of how things get into the top of the agenda or get into the agenda. In this case, implementation, policy implementation, and of course, there are a lot of scholars who commented on ways how things get on the agenda, and one of them is, for example, focus events as a result of some natural disasters or other things that can happen unexpectedly. Things can get into agenda, but the other one is that things can get into agenda as a result of the information that the governments gather, and this is partially what we want to also do to impact policies by providing some statistical information, some data that will highlight specific binding constraints in the development, not only on the country level, but also on the sub-national level as well. So it's probably no need to specify the agenda and the agenda setting processes. I think they are quite self-explanatory, but we want to impact the agenda formulation both at the systemic, institutional, and the decision agenda levels. And the survey was pretty long. It consisted of four main parts. First, of course, it's a national SDG priorities, on starting with the awareness of the SDGs, and then going into details of asking people to rank the SDGs according to priorities, but also going to specific sections on external, internal threats and the national mood questions as well. That's something that we as a public policy researchers are very much interested in. And then there's a section on regional priorities where people are asked to answer questions on regional issues. And then there's a third level, which is an individual level, which contains more of the questions related to individual well-being. And of course, the reason why we wanted to include this is because we wanted to also to apply the Nexus approach in order to try to find correlations, for example, between the individual well-being and how people prioritize certain SDGs when they are ranking the problems. And then final section is about our attempt to measure the public trust and the social fragmentation and in relation to people's exposure to media and the questions on where, for example, simple questions of do they trust the government, but also questions on where people get the information and to what extent they trust the information that they get. So these are the sections, and we tried to cover the 17 regions and then 3 major cities, and it was done in an online platform in 2 languages, Kazakh and Russian, the 2 languages that are spoken in Kazakhstan predominantly. And we used the services of the Darwin Project company, and of course we have some limitations in the survey. The first and foremost, it's we could not, of course, achieve the representative sample in all categories for understandable reasons. That, for example, the senior population, that, for example, people who are 60 and older, they are underrepresented for the reasons that the survey was online and it was not easy to obtain the responses from certain categories of the population. But we tried as much as possible. Also, we found out later that the SDG awareness is pretty lower than expected, and this is why it might be challenging for people to respond to all questions, and we have only 2/3 of the respondents who managed to respond to all questions. But also it's because of the length of the survey as well. Overall, we had 40 questions, but also there were some of the questions were pretty long because of the number of options provided. And so the rate of non-response was a bit higher than expected because of the length of the survey, and also we believe it was because of the lower awareness of the SDGs. But this is the number of overall respondents, 3,295, and you can see that from overall respondents, only about 2/3 responded to all questions. And we have pretty good female-male balance. There's a bit more inclination towards more urban population. And then we have different age groups. Some of them are represented better in this survey. And then these are the education groups as well. So I would say that the sample was also pretty well educated, which is why our findings about the low SDG awareness is surprising, because you could see that at least the majority of people have at least the university degree and higher, the bachelor and degree and higher. Okay, so for some of the results, of course, we only started analyzing the data, but we wanted to provide today at least the descriptive data of the results. So, for example, on the SDG awareness, we could see that the majority, more than 50% of the population, either never heard of the SDGs or heard them, but they don't know what it really means. And then there is only 21% who said that they know what the SDGs are. In terms of ranking the SDGs by population in the priorities, you could. Our observation was that so this is by the percentage of how many votes each SDG gathered in the end. This is a general question on which SDGs should be prioritized. So we could see here that it's stopped by quality of education and good health and well-being responses, and then followed by work and economic growth and no poverty and peace, justice, and strong institutions. And I think that's first of all, I was puzzled to get the data, but then we can see that the issues prioritized, they are mostly in the domain of the human capital development. So the things that compose the human development index, for example, it's education, it's healthcare and well-being, and then it's the income or the decent work and economic growth. And I think, but then I thought about why we get these responses in these categories higher than the others, and our explanation now at the moment is because these are the SDGs that people can relate to at the personal level. So, for example, most of the respondents had children, and they think about the schools that the children go to, and then, of course, the health is also one of the personal concerns of the people, and then, of course, income, work, and economic growth is something that affecting the well-being and of the population. So this is the reason we believe that these SDGs inevitably will get more responses year after year, even if you do this survey on an annual basis. But also we can see that on some of the other categories, for example, when we ask to rank the external threats, we can see that it is dictated by the focusing events or everyday events that people experience. So, for example, when we get to the section where people are ranking the external threats, you could see that natural disasters was ranked very high in the survey responses. And the reason is because this year Kazakhstan experienced major flooding, especially the northern parts of Kazakhstan. And also there were earthquakes in the south, in Almaty. And these focusing events explain why some of the threats were ranked pretty high in overall country ranking. So these are the remaining priorities that are there, but I will also I'll be showing this on a map, and we'll try to create an interactive map. So here, for example, the one that I mentioned, it's about the external threats ranked by population, and you could see here that the first one is natural disasters, and as I said, it's our explanation is that this is very highly influenced by the events that happened recently. It's a flooding and earthquakes that happened, flooding in north and the earthquakes in South Kazakhstan. Then it's considering the war in Ukraine, it's threat of external aggression. You can see that 47% marked this response, and then it's the economic crisis and threat of terrorism, and then moral decline and the external influences. Interestingly, had made it in the top 5 external threats. And then so when we try to do this interactive map of the issues at the subnational level, my concern was that the map would be very homogeneous, that there will be only same problems across all the country, but also actually the results show that it's not very homogeneous, and each region would have their own problems that they rank higher. But of course, overarchingly, we can see that governance problems related to corruption, bribery, and patronage, they are ranked the highest across the country. Of course, we can look into the second and third, because this is only first ranked issues at the subnational level. And then we can see that surprisingly, for me as well, I was expecting that the environmental problems would not get much attention in the survey responses, but we can see here that the green area here, it's the area where the RLC is in South Kazakhstan, and in that area, people ranked as #1 problem for their region. It's the environmental problem or the problems of the RLC and the Caspian Sea. And that was a rather surprising finding for us, because studies suggest that in developing countries where people have more immediate problems, such as the poverty, unemployment, people will not rank the environmental concerns high. But it seems like in this particular region, this problem of the RLC affected also the well-being of the population and health, because of the quality of living and deteriorated, and people also lost their jobs as a result. So fishery is practically impossible nowadays in that region. So the environmental problem affected as well many people on the individual level, and this is why I believe people ranked this issue high. And so we have also poverty and low income and housing affordability. And then, interestingly, the regions that produce a lot of raw materials and natural resources, they ranked the distance between the center and the region as a very important problem. And this is also confirmed with our field works in West Kazakhstan. So we went, for example, to this Mangistau region 2 years ago when we were interviewing people. The respondents were commenting as well that this region is producing oil, which is the major export for Kazakhstan, but the government is not investing enough in the, for example, in the infrastructure and the well-being and the education in this particular region. And this is confirmed with the survey results as well. But also in East Kazakhstan, this is a East Kazakhstan region, which is also where a lot of factories are concentrated that produce, for example, zinc and uranium and other natural resources. And this is where also people voted for the option that the government is distanced, or the central government is not paying enough attention to the regional problems. So this is some interesting, and we want to, in the end, we want to create some interactive map as well, where we would click on a particular region, and then the map will show the rankings of the regional problems at this particular location. Okay, I think I don't have much time, so I'll speed up with the findings. So this is just the explanation of events that happened over the past year and how they might have affected the responses. That includes flooding, the war in Ukraine, and a few other responses. I'm not going to go into detail on that. But in the end, our report also will be able to provide data on each particular region, and we want to include at least 1 or 2 pages for each major city in the region, including how people rank the SDG priorities. So, for example, today I'll just talk about Almaty, which is the largest city in Kazakhstan, and as expected, we can see that it aligns with the country responses as well in terms of education and health, and work as well. All the top three align with the country risk data, but also we can see that some of the SDGs that are related to local problems are also ranked high in Almaty, and that includes, for example, the infrastructure. The 30% of people marked this, and then it's gender equality is ranked high here, which is not the case, for example, in the places where people voted in the rural area. Gender equality is not ranked that high, and then no poverty is there. And when people ask to vote on the regional issues in terms of the city priorities, you can see that some of the things that are specific to Almaty were ranked very high. Of course, it's governance problems, but also we can see that the air pollution, which is those people, if you've been to Almaty, you will know that it's the city just in the valley of the mountains, and the air pollution problem is very prominent in Almaty. And then it's poverty and low income, inflation, housing, traffic jams as well. So we had a specific indicator on the traffic jams in public transport. And it's also, as a large city, I think in Almaty, traffic problem is becoming an increasingly prominent problem. Okay, so I think I'll jump through some other regions. And a couple of things on the climate change. What's an interesting observation from these responses? So we asked 3 questions related to climate change and the energy transition. So first one, we asked people whether they believe that the climate change should be taken seriously, and then secondly, we asked them to comment on react on the popular notion that in Kazakhstan the climate change should not be prioritized because we have some other more important problems. And then the third one is another popular view that since Kazakhstan is resource rich, there is a lot of oil and coal, and it's a bit too early for the country to start the energy transition. And what's interesting about these findings is that we find a strong support for the belief that this climate change should be taken seriously. But we can see here that it's overwhelmingly strong support. But also when it comes to other questions, such as the energy transition questions, we can see that people believe, there are a lot of people who believe that actually there are a majority that believe that Kazakhstan should start energy transition to renewable energy. But also we can see that there is a huge section of the respondents, which is as big as 1/3 of the respondents who have a neutral position. And I think that's, people just reacted that they have a neutral position to this proposition. And I believe that this is the people who are not yet convinced, and there is a lot that can be done in terms of awareness of the climate change and awareness of the need to energy transition, because these are the people who did not decide yet or don't have an opinion on this because they don't have awareness, or they were not exposed to information about the climate change and energy transition. And then finally, I'm not going to talk much about this, but it's third section on the individual well-being. So we wanted to also include questions on the life aspects and the well-being aspects. And then there is also at the individual level, we ask people about whether they have been discriminated, whether they have ever been discriminated. And you could see that it's percentage of people who never been discriminated. It's a minority, but people have been discriminated on different factors, including language, nationality, religion, and other things. But this actually, we also I asked some of my team members to try to use the quantitative analysis to run some regressions on the results. And for example, this one that we did is about the correlation, and we found a strong correlation between the people's experiences of gender discrimination. So people who mark that they've been discriminated by gender in the past, they also tend to prioritize gender inequality as the most important issue. But also when they are ranking the SDGs, the people who have the experience of gender discrimination, they tend to rank the SDG 5, which is gender inequality, also very high in the list of priorities. So this is indeed just the beginning of the quantitative, our attempts to also come up with the quantitative analysis of the data that we gathered so far. So there are some policy implications and conclusions. First of all, the survey results show strong preference towards human capital development elements of the SDG, and that includes education and healthcare, and also decent work and decent employment and economic growth. And also, of course, we can see that because the problems that people ranked in different areas, they were not homogeneous across Kazakhstan, but there were differences. It also shows that the need for take into account the differences, or as I mentioned, the diagnostic approach that I mentioned in the beginning. And then also the fact that we have a lot of people who were neutral to the questions of the climate change and energy transition. It also shows that there is a need to improve public awareness and engagement and introduce them to the problems of the climate change and the impact on the well-being as well. And then finally, of course, survey also showed that the governance problems still prevailing when people are asked to rank the regional issues. The corruption and other governance problems rank very high, so it's also one of the priorities. Economic instability and discrimination, these must be addressed also through targeted and inclusive policies. And this is it. Thank you very much for your attention, and you can check the data. We will be publishing the data in our website as well, which is SDSN.kz on the first line here. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks a lot for a very comprehensive and interesting talk. So the floor is open for questions, remarks, suggestions, also of course from the ones who join online.
Thanks again for this interesting talk. I mean, I think what you're doing is a great start, but one of the things I'm a little bit concerned with is that the data that you have seems to be a little bit skewed in terms that you have like over 50% bachelor students and like, I don't know, 25% master students.
Not students, but people who have the degree.
Yeah, as a degree. So I was wondering, did you check like, is there any qualitative differences between these groups in terms of what they answer? Or is it like, are they similar in terms of what they value most in terms of the SDGs?
Yes, I think in the end, this is what we want to do. We haven't started the work on this direction, but one of the principles of the Agenda 2030 is leaving no one behind. So what we want to do is to create a profile of, for example, people who are very much privileged, have higher education and have decent work and so on. And then we want to see the data from the people who are, for example, unemployed or don't have a higher education. And we want also to come up with these categories, but also to see the responses that how each of these categories responded. I
just want to make sure I'm seeing it as okay. Yeah, thanks. I also really enjoyed watching your presentation, listening to you, and think the data is quite stimulating. And I see your point, Christoph. I mean, you also showed these regional maps, right? And I mean, many of the regions on the maps are, I mean, there simply are no big cities, right? Or hardly any, so it's automatically fairly rural. And there were notable differences apparently also, right? What people thought was important. Maybe you can say a few more words about the sampling in those peripheral provinces. So I also didn't fully get that. So what can we expect? Who is represented in the region just near to the Aral Sea, for example?
Mm-hmm.
Is it villages or how did the data collection company work to find people in these regions?
They have the representatives in each of these regions, so they work with the representatives in these regions, and we were quite closely monitoring the data collection, and we were hinting them that the data is skewed towards this or that category, so please work on to collect data from, for example, if there is at first stage, for example, we had female respondents overrepresented, so we asked them to work on this, and then we had urban representation predominantly in the survey, and then we asked them, and eventually we managed to get 70-30, 70 urban and 30 rural representation, which is not ideal, but this was as close as we could get to. I think the most difficult was the age representativeness for obvious reasons. Some groups were pretty hard to recruit for the survey, but you're right. I think when it comes to regional representativeness, I think there are hardly any cities except Almaty, Astana, and Shymkent that have over 1 million population. All other cities have below 1 million citizens population. It's a big country, but in terms of population, we are a pretty small country. And at the country level, I think our sample is quite representative. I wouldn't say that it is not ideally representative, but we tried to do a good number of responses. But at the regional level, some regions have good response rate. Some have remote regions have lower. We were setting targets, but at least we were trying to get over 150 from each region, even if it's a low populated region. We tried to get at least 150 respondents. That's a minimum from each region. And of course, the report will contain information. The final report that we'll produce this summer will contain information about how each region is represented in the survey.
How did they in fact sample the company? How did the company sample the respondents? How did they find them?
It was online survey. So what they did is they have very strong links with within the regions, especially with the educational institutions, and they have, because the company is working in the area of supporting science and research. So they have, and also we try to utilize our network, SDSN network as well. So we have 24 universities and research organizations. So we were sending emails to the network through our SDSN network, but also the company was using their own network and their own representatives in each region to recruit respondents.
The respondents were contacted by email and were asked to sign up in an online form and do the survey, or?
Yes, by email, but also there was an open link that could be sent to by social media as well. And also we were monitoring the data collection in terms of, for example, the Qualtrics software allows us to modify the settings so that one respondent can only respond on one IP address, can only take survey once, so that we would try to also make sure that the same person will not be taking the surveys several times. But also the company had their own checks on the representatives. They were having weekly meetings as well with us and with the company to make sure that data is or sample is as representative as possible.
Okay, if I have a question in one other direction. I noted you spent quite a bit of time on talking about the growth diagnostics, which I appreciate. I think it's an important concept and important literature that you are highlighting, especially also relevant for Central Asia. I've been using it myself in some of my work on agricultural policy, etc. However, I could not see the direct link to the rest of your presentation. So no doubt it's important, but I mean, how can this kind of data collection and this kind of survey help you for undertaking growth diagnostics? I'm not sure how that's possible actually. Or you see it just as a first step for identifying policy areas, maybe.
Yes. So we were inspired by the growth diagnostic approach in order to do this granular approach. So what we try to do is to get responses from the different regions in order to. I was not myself expecting that the responses from the regional problems will be as heterogeneous as we get in the end. So I think that the idea of the growth diagnostics is that each country have their own binding constraints. And what we wanted to show here as well is that each region would have their own problems or issues that will deserve attention for the policymakers. And of course, in the growth diagnostics, of course, with the you work a lot with the quantitative data, such as how the people can get access to credit, how people can easy to open a business, and so on and so forth. Here we worked with survey responses in order to visualize the data that we get received.
I have one thing. Thank you for the presentation. Regarding the Crystal's and Martin's questions, I mean, you can apply clustering analysis to see the differences in priorities between in general, this method to see the difference between rural, urban, ages, education, and other criteria. It's one of the positives of analysis. And my question would be, so extensive work already conducted in terms of data collection, so now you're working on data analysis, right? And what are the future steps, like in general? How do you think, who would be interested in the survey results? And what are your, at least in your agenda, or what do you think about the dissemination of research results?
As part of SDG said that we are also encouraged to contribute to VNR voluntary national reviews that countries do, and the next voluntary national review that Kazakhstan will do is in 2025. So we very much hope that our results will also find their way into the in this Kazakhstan's voluntary national review that will come next year in 2025, and also we are hoping that the government agencies, especially Ministry of Economy and Regional Development, will be interested in the findings. But also we will send a report to other stakeholders, development agencies such as the UNDP, ADB in Kazakhstan, and we are hoping that they will also be interested in this work. And of course, ideally, we want to do this survey on an annual basis, and maybe in different year have specific. Also, the last section would be focusing on different things. So, for example, today on this one, we had 3 main sections that focused on the national, subnational, and individual levels. And then the 4th section was focusing on the trust, public trust, and the fragmentation. And of course, if we do it next year, maybe there is a chance that we have the same the core of the survey, but also the 4th element could be looking at other things that we identified, for example, in this year's survey. And we want to look deeper in the governance problems, for example, and we might have a variation in the last part of the survey. So that's the idea.
Yeah, thanks one more time. I have one suggestion and 1 or 2 questions. So regarding the previous comments, I also actually wrote down. So what I think is always good if you have your description of your sample, at least this is my personal impression, that because right now you had it simply listed up that you have a table and you have 2 columns, you have your sample, and then you have a column for how it's distributed in Kazakhstan. So because then we can immediately see, where there is actually quite a good match and where it differs, and maybe even for the region itself. So I think this would help for readers, so maybe for the next time to have some table like this.
To see how their regions are well represented or not.
That you have your variables, for example, gender you had, okay, how does it match with the gender distribution in Kazakhstan itself? You have the different education levels. How is it? Because I remember, I assume it's actually maybe matching quite well because a lot of people simply have a bachelor, right? In Kazakhstan. So I guess it's actually, I think that's simply different to German typical, because we have a different system with the Ausbildung. So I guess it would, but then we could immediately see, you know, how does it match? So I always feel that's quite helpful. And if you could go to slide 17, or maybe, yeah, I think that was, so it was said, so in general, this ranking you did, honestly speaking, I didn't fully get how people were ranking SDGs, and then you had also there, yeah, I will wait until you're, I think it's slide 17.
Okay, 17. Here?
Yeah, for example, yeah. So again, could you explain what the percentage now tells me?
Yeah.
Because also with the ranking of the SDG, you have then I think 70%. So how did I rank as there? So I ranked only the top 3. I had to rank all 17. So how? Yeah.
Yes, people had a chance to rank top 5 out of 20. So even in this one, for example, we provided the 20 options, and then they are ranked. So this is why, for example,